Artemis. Again, anyone who knows me has known for years I've been saying we've got to go back to the moon. We've got to go back to the moon. We've got to get back to the moon. At $2 to $4 billion a launch, it's going to be a hard one for many to swallow. This is an expensive rocket. The SRB technology from the space shuttle, there was all sorts of reasons why it should have potentially been more economical. It's not. It's a staggering launch cost, and the cadence of about one mission per year, it's an even more staggering launch cost if you think what they were doing during the Apollo era. Obviously, this is on a scale of the Saturn V, slightly larger by the time it gets to its full configuration. You've obviously had all the work done by the likes of Lockheed Martin on the Orion spacecraft, the European Space Agency on the service module, the modified ATV, as it were. That couples with Orion. Orion itself, we were talking about the Mars mission and the worry with the heat shield. The Orion's got a heat shield not far short of the size of that potential Mars mission. So it's doable. The crew cabin on Orion is like a gigantic version of the Apollo command module. It's looking really good. Now, what's happened here is, again, very similar to what's happened recently with Mars. At NASA, after all the to-ing and fro with Congress, and again, a lot of this comes down to congressional budgets, how things get funded. And if you look at the James Webb, back in 2010, 2011, Congress was saying, we're going to cancel this. This is gone. This is too expensive. And there's been so many things with the Constellation program, now with Artemis, etc., and the return to the moon is happening. It's going to happen. I mean, this thing's out on the pad. They're doing what they call wet tests. They're doing like potential launch preparation tests, etc. As long as it doesn't blow up on the pad. And don't forget, Starship, they've done the kind of fail fast, keep going kind of mantra with SpaceX. Artemis is a lot more reserved, but it's Boeing developing the contracts, and there's massive cost overruns there, and I've had lots of quite heated arguments about Boeing and honesty and reliability and all of the other things, and would you trust them? But yes, they've got a huge heritage. Let's not beat about the bush here. Lockheed Martin, Boeing, massive heritage dating back to the Apollo era, with spacecraft, etc., and hopefully they've done a really good job. Now, what's happened here is that, if you remember a couple of years back, there was a big fight for who was going to develop the lunar lander. And Jeff Bezos unveiled this wonderful looking, glorified, huger, bigger version of the LM, the lunar landing module, the Spider style module that we had in Apollo, was his proposal. And then the contract went to SpaceX. And SpaceX's intent is to land Starship on the moon. Now, the down thrust from that is going to be interesting with lunar rocks, lunar regolith, and all the other stuff. It's going to be fun to watch that one. And it's a big rocket. And then you've got the whole, transfer down. There's all sorts of things why people are a bit cagey about the idea. But you can't knock SpaceX. They do know what they're doing in terms of landing technology. They're doing it way better than anyone else. So there's now been a kind of about face by Bill Nelson, who's the NASA administrator, and it's like, well, we're going to open this up again. So they'd shut it down. They said they didn't have enough money. There was, contract bids. It was going to be SpaceX. So SpaceX is still continuing to develop their landing system for the Artemis 3 mission, which will be the first time that humans go back to the moon since December 1972, when Gene Cernan and Jack Schmitt were on the lunar surface and Ron Evans orbiting on Apollo 17. First time they're going back then. Hopefully male and female astronauts, and probably, maybe not just two, maybe a few more landing on the lunar surface, which will be incredible to watch. Can't wait to see that myself. But then from 2026-27 onwards, with the subsequent Artemis missions, they want a more sustainable kind of longer term approach, integrating the lunar gateway, which I've talked to many of the Apollo flight controllers, and they hate that thing completely. They think it's just not the right way to do it. But anyway, what would they know? As a former NASA administrator once said, they were just kids. And that was a direct quote from a NASA administrator, Charlie Bolden. But it's one of those things that I think the approach now is going to give NASA a better return. They're looking at more innovation, more foresight, other companies, and they have to be US companies developing this. So you're probably going to get the likes of Lockheed Martin, SpaceX, etc., vying for the contracts to build the lander. Northrop Grumman. There could be any number of the big defense contract primes or other companies working on this. And then to give this kind of ability to dock with the gateway and then transfer down to the lunar surface and deliver more science. So being able to it's a more robust lander. They're looking at something a bit chunkier, as it were. Now, how you get more chunkier than a Starship, I don't know. as that's a massive beast in itself. But that's the aim, is to put something quite intricate down onto the lunar surface and do, it's all about longevity with this now. It's not, a few days drifting around on a rover from Apollo 15, 16, 17. It's going to be staying on the surface, learning how to live there. And this is going to give us hopefully lots of guidance into how to go to Mars. Whole different ball game in terms of technical complexity and radiation and bone mass loss and duration of mission and all sorts. But so the timeline for this is actually quite tight. So NASA this week is saying that they want preliminary proposals, and then April is going to be a kind of design workshop type thing. And then the idea is they're going to give them 4 to 5 years to build this lander. Now you think, well, okay, 4 to 5 years is a good length of time. Anyone who's ever worked on any form of space mission, I've only worked on very small pico satellites. You're looking at, it's quite a long process. You look at the Rosetta mission and, Philae lander and all the elements. That was decades long. So 5 years is quite tight to build a human-rated lander to go down to the lunar surface and get it working, viably working. How they do this, there's going to be billions invested in this. SpaceX are kind of not allowed to bid into this, but they are allowed to do modifications, and I'm sure SpaceX will probably come into this in somewhere or other. But I think NASA have done a good thing here. I think they've given themselves a few more options, and competition's good. You look at the Apollo era, and it was all competitive tendering and competitive bids, and the great quotes from some of the astronauts saying, we're sitting on £7.5 million of basically high explosive built by the lowest bidder. It's one of those things that you've got to take that into account. But Orion, definitely, I think Orion is a beautifully designed, beautifully conceived, wonderfully robust module capsule. I think the service module as well. Absolutely fantastic, proven technology. Hopefully the rocket, the SLS itself, is going to launch with no faults and no problems at all.